Well, thanks for joining us again today. This is Rule 18 we're going to cover on Rules Monday. This is a segment we do every Monday here in the winter of 21, spring of 21, to kind of compensate for our lack of in-person seminars. So each Monday we dig into one rule for about an hour, hour and a half, and really kind of dissect it and go through it. So meant to add a little fun there and on your Mondays. And again, we post these online when we're done. So if you miss one, we have them all cataloged. Next week is going to be our last week. Actually, we're going to cover Rule 19, unplayable balls, next week. So after that, we'll have done 12 of these videos so far. So we've got a pretty good catalog, I think. So and they'll be timely, at least for the next 2 years until there's a revision out. So even then, they'll probably be fine. So anyways, today we've got Rule 18. This is the one about lost ball, out of bounds, stroke and distance, and then a provisional ball. At the end, we will cover Model Local Rule E5. We do get a lot of questions about that. So we'll kind of break that down. And while you won't see it used at a CGA event or certainly on any kind of a tour or a championship, it's still pretty applicable. And the USGA, did a good job in formulating it and using it for your casual play. So certainly worth looking at. So we'll do that at the end. Right now, we're just going to go through the text of Rule 18 like we normally do. And then we'll cover local rule E5 at the end. Again, as we go, we'll have question slides where I'll stop. And if you have a question, you can unmute and ask it. Or during the seminar, if you want to just type it into the chat bar during the breaks, Ashley will just bring that up. And sometimes I might have already answered it. I might be going to answer it later on. So again, if you have any questions, just type them in or unmute yourself when we have a question slide. And at the end, if you have any questions just in general about something that we didn't cover or you want me to elaborate more on, we can certainly do that. I won't be going anywhere right when we're done. So again, let's jump into Rule 18. All right, so again, this is the Rule 18 here. This is stroke and distance relief for ball lost or out of bounds that are treated very similarly in the rules and how you operate under them. And then also a provisional ball, which I don't want to say is complicated. I think people can construe it as complicated, but I think when we break it down, that's the point of all these, is to make it as simple as possible. So that one we'll dive into as well. So this Rule 18, is broken down into 3 sections. We have stroke and distance relief being allowed at any time. Breeze right through that one. 18.2 for a ball lost or out of bounds. And then you must take stroke and distance relief. So we're going to tack on 18.1 falling at 18.2. And then lastly, we'll have the provisional ball, when you can and when you cannot play that, when it becomes the ball in play, pretty much everything we need there. And then again, it's not included here, but we will cover that model local rule for the stroke and distance equidistant arc for lost ball or ball out of bounds. So let's dive in. Again, the first thing we always like to look at when we're looking at a rule is kind of the purpose statement. Again, these aren't necessarily rule making, but it kind of gives an overview of what we're going to be looking at here in the rule. And it's at the beginning of every rule. And as we've seen, some rules have 2 in there, right? So this one only has 1, but again, important to read it and kind of get a good mindset for the rest of the rule by reading the purpose of the rule. And it says Rule 18 covers taking relief under penalty of stroke and distance when a ball is lost outside a penalty area or comes to rest out of bounds. The required progression of playing from the teeing area to the hole is broken. The player must resume that progression by playing again from where the previous stroke was made. This rule also covers how and when a provisional ball may be played to save time when the ball in play might have gone out of bounds or be lost outside of the penalty area. So in the purpose of the rule here, we have 8.1 and 8.2, excuse me. Sorry, it's definitely spring. We have 8.1 and 8.2 kind of covered in that first paragraph, and 8.3 is in that second paragraph, second sentence. Separated there. So again, I like the way it says required progression of playing from the teeing area to the hole, insinuating that there's a line you have to follow that can't be broken, in which case you might be playing from a wrong place, in which case there's more than likely a serious breach if you're required to play under stroke and distance and you don't. Most of the time, that's probably going to be a pretty big issue. So I like that it says, the word progression there, playing the ball from the teeing area into the hole. So, all right, let's look at the rule here. 8.1 is pretty short, and really it's pretty simple. And this kind of applies to other rules too, even though it's the stroke and distance rule. This is applicable in, playing under an unplayable ball in Rule 19 next week, or playing under stroke and distance in Rule 17, like we saw last week. But what it says is relief under penalty of stroke and distance is allowed at any time. And it says at any time, the player may take stroke and distance relief by adding one penalty stroke and playing the original ball or another ball from where the previous stroke was made. So here what we're saying, or what the rules are saying, is at any given point, you don't have to operate under, where your ball lies. If you just want to replay the stroke, you can totally do that. So if you're playing in the fairway and you shank one dead right, and it goes into the junk, that's not a penalty or anything. You don't have to search for it. You can just say, I'm going to play under stroke and distance. I don't want to go fool with that. I don't want to mess with that. I mean, you could even, have a 10-foot putt it 20 feet by and say, I'm just going to replay that stroke and place it down. You've now put a ball in play under stroke and distance. So the rules are saying at any given point, and I don't want to say give up, but you can kind of you can redo it, right? You can replay the stroke you just made. It's going to cost you a penalty stroke, and again, stroke and distance. So it's penal in two ways. If you're teeing off and you hit the ball 300 yards out of bounds, 300 yards at the fairway, you get penalized the stroke, so you lose stroke, but you also lose the advantage of any distance. So you're back to where you started from, hitting 3 theoretically in that situation. And again, this is not, we're not leaning at the model local rule yet. We're not there yet. So don't worry. We're not going to worry about that yet. Again, so we see here, the first thing out of the rules is stroke and distance is italicized, which means it's a definition. So let's look at that. The definition for stroke and distance is the procedure and penalty when a player takes relief from Rule 17, 18, or 19 by playing a ball from where the previous stroke was made, and see Rule 14.6, which we'll look at in a moment. The term stroke and distance means both that the player both gets one penalty stroke, kind of like I said, and loses the benefit of any gain of distance towards the hole from that spot from where the previous stroke was made. So it's almost like a penalty stroke and a half, because you're losing, you're actually penalized a stroke, and then any distance. And that could be a very small distance, or it could be a long distance, depending on how far you hit that ball there. Right? So going back to the rule, at the end it says when you play a ball under stroke and distance, you play under 14.6. That's telling you, depending on what area of the course your last stroke was played from, is how you'll take stroke and distance relief. So if you played from the teeing area and at any point, because your ball is lost or it's out of bounds, or you're taking an unplayable, or your ball's in a penalty area, the stroke and distance, your relief area in this case, is going to be the teeing area that you just played from. So come back to the teeing area, and we know that when you're playing a ball from the teeing area, you could obviously re-tee it, change clubs, move to a different spot, but you're playing back from the teeing area. The general area, bunker, or penalty area. So if your ball was last played, which is most of the time, I think, general area, bunker, or penalty area, you get one club length from the spot where the ball was last played. So here, in the rules do a really good job at the pictures here. That little middle black dot, that in the middle picture, that is where the stroke was made. From there, you get one club length, no closer to the hole, and it must be in the same area of the course that you last played from. So used to be you had to drop it as near as possible to that spot. Now you get a pretty wide area to redrop and play. And we'll see this again when it comes to provisional. So keep this in mind, because a provisional ball is a ball played predicated that the original ball is lost outside of the penalty area or out of bounds, in which case you're kind of jumping the gun on taking stroke and distance. You're saying, well, in case it is provisional stroke and distance, and I'm going to use this procedure. So again, nothing we're going to jump into right now, but we'll come back in 18.3 here. And then on the putting green, you'd place the ball. So again, Tiger Woods did this in the Masters once. He putted the ball from the back of 13 green, and it went into the penalty area there. And stroke and distance in that case, he's going to retry. He's just placing a ball back on the spot from which he last hit the ball, right? So that's stroke and distance. The putting green doesn't happen all that much. I mean, it really doesn't. You really got to, have that ball get away from you to have stroke and distance on putting green. But the rules do contemplate it, and it has happened before, obviously. All right, and then it says the player always has this stroke and distance relief option, no matter where the player's ball is on the course, so in any area of the course. And even when a rule requires the player to take relief in a certain way or to play a ball from a certain place. So, you could be, you're on a cart path and the rule says, well, you're going to take cart path relief, says, well, I'm going to play stroke and distance. That's fine too. You can do that. So it's allowed at any time. Because once the player puts another ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance, And then see Rule 14.4, the original ball is no longer in play and must not be played. And this is true even if the original ball is then found on the course before the end of the 3-minute search time under 6.3b. And the 3-minute search time we haven't gotten to yet because that's going to be what a lost ball is, which we're going to get to in 18.2, but up until now. So what this is saying is once you put a ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance, meaning you've dropped a ball with the intent or placed a ball with the intent of it to be in play, and it was under a stroke and distance procedure, that's binding. You can't change that and say, well, I looked for a minute, didn't find my ball in the tall stuff. I'm going to play under stroke and distance. You drop a ball, you put it in play. Then the ball is found a minute later, so less than the 3 minutes. You already put a ball in play. Now, if the ball was put in play as a provisional ball, that's a little different. But if you just put the ball in play under stroke and distance, that's binding. You've kind of reestablished that progression to the hole by putting a ball in play with the intent for it to put in play. Because if you drop it in the relief area and let's say it rolls in a divot or a poor lie, and then someone says, oh, I found the ball, and you're like, oh, thank God, I didn't want to play this ball anyways. You've rolled the dice or you've put a ball in play, you're bound to that. So in that case, recommend you search for the 3 minutes or declare it a provisional, which is fine. And wait till the end of the 3 minutes before you put a ball in play. But if you put a ball in play without declaring a provisional, that's going to be binding. And the rules here say that ball's in play. And then this also refers back to 6.3b. We didn't cover that rule, but that talks about putting a ball in play when under knowledge of virtual certainty and or stroke and distance. So, and it says, but this penalty of stroke and distance does not apply to a ball to be played from where the previous stroke was made when the player announces that he or she is playing a provisional ball, which we'll see later in the rule here in 18.3b, or is playing a second ball in stroke play under 14.7b or 20.1c3, which 14.7b is a serious breach wrong place, meaning you're correcting your mistake or what you think might be a mistake. And then 20.1c3, that's that old 3.3-3 playing two balls under uncertainty of relief procedure. So in which case those rules are very special to say you don't know what's going on in the rules, so you're playing two to be sure that you've played in accordance with the rules, because there's no referee present, or even the referee says, hey, we need you, or official says we need you to play two balls because we need to see, this might be GUR, this might be out of bounds or something like that because it's not marked properly. So in any case, those are the two exceptions there. So any questions so far under 18.1 before we get to 18.2? All right. 18.2, we're going to ball lost or out of bounds. And I inferred a minute ago that we're going to talk more about lost ball. That's that 3-minute search time. And then stroke and distance relief must be taken when we have a ball that is lost or a ball that is out of bounds. And this rule defines exactly what a lost ball is and the definition for a lost ball and exactly when a ball is out of bounds. It's a very fine line, as we'll see, and we'll get into some officiating procedures that kind of come with the ball being out of bounds and stuff we do with that. So this is broken up into two sections, really. It's 18.2a when the ball is lost or out of bounds, and 18.2b when what to do when the ball is lost or out of bounds. So is it lost or out of bounds? Yes. Okay, now what do you do in B? So that's A, then B. So under A, we have a ball is lost if it is not found in 3 minutes after the player or his or her caddy begins to search for it. And again, we have the word lost here, which is italicized, so that's a definition. So let's look at that. And it says lost is the status of a ball that is not found in 3 minutes after the player or his or her caddy or the player's partner or partner's caddy. So in this case, the player's partner is his or her side or their caddy begins to search for it. And this was a big change from 2019 prior. It used to be 5 minutes, and then now it's 3. The thought being that most balls, if they're not found between 0 and 3 minutes, they're not going to be found between 4 and 5. So let's just cut out that extra fat and hopefully speed up play instead of taking the full 5. But as we know, unless you're in a tournament or something or with another player who's very updated on the rules, most players, once they start searching, don't pull out a stopwatch or their phone and say, oh, I'm going to time it exactly. It's more of a feel thing. And the rules don't really say that, but in practical application, it's kind of what they are. So again, typically, you're going to have exactly 3 minutes, and the rules say we should know what that is. And typically, again, if we're officiating, we've got a clock or a stopwatch or something to help us out there. Goes on to say if the search begins and is then temporarily interrupted for good reason, such as when the player stops searching and play is suspended for, let's say, lightning, or needs to stand aside to wait for another player to play, or when the player has mistakenly identified a wrong ball, the time between the interruption and when the search resumes does not count, and the time allowed for the search is 3 minutes in total, counting the search time both before the interruption and after the search resumes. So the way I kind of talk about this a lot is it's 3 minutes of active search time, right? You're actively looking for 3 minutes. Or again, the clock does stop in these couple limited situations, but I was saying is you get 3 actual minutes of solid search time. And that's I think the easiest way to consolidate this rule. And there's a lot of nuances in it, and you can look in the definitions of lost in the interpretations book, and it goes even further into what are some applicable stoppages. Or let's say you've not identified your ball and said, oh, that's someone else's ball, and you look around and that really was your ball. Well, that's now a lost ball because you didn't take time to identify it. So there's more stuff in the interpretations here. We don't get into as much. We do pick at one later, but again, basic thought here is active 3 minutes of search time. Then it goes on to say the player or his or her caddy. So a ball is lost if not found in 3 minutes after the player, his or her caddy, begins to search for it. So those are the two important people. And again, we saw in loss is or the partner or the partner's caddy. That's a team event, but it just on its own, and 95% of the time, it is a player, him or herself, or sometimes the caddy that searches for it. So if a player and caddy hit a ball from the teeing area and it's 300 yards away, and I'm a rules official and I start looking for it, that clock hasn't stopped, because it wouldn't make much sense if they're the first to hit and then I'm looking for it, the other two hit and they're fine, and I'm looking for it. Then the player gets up there and says, oh, I've been searching for 3 minutes. Your ball's lost. Well, the party concerned, the player and the caddy, and potentially the partner's caddy, didn't get a chance to look. So that obviously wouldn't make sense. So the player, him or herself, gets 3 minutes to look for their golf ball. Now, this obviously doesn't mean that another player or a spectator, right? And we've seen this on TV a lot, maybe at the Open Championship, where they hit it into the gorse and there's a whole crowd out there searching for the ball. That's all fine and well. The clock doesn't start until the player or caddy gets to that ball where it's estimated to be. And if for officiating purposes, when do you start the clock? We get that a lot. If I'm already up there and I'm searching for it, as soon as the player gets into the area that's estimated to be and their head goes down to start looking, that's when I start the clock. So again, 3 minutes when the player or caddy gets to it. So again, as officials, if you're officiating, we can always look for it prior to that if they want us to find it. If they didn't play a provisional, certainly, but if they've played a provisional and they played it well, maybe you don't want to look for it, because then if you find it, like we'll see, they're now tied to that ball. So again, 3 minutes when the player or caddy gets there to help search for it. And this jumps us kind of to an interpretation, 8.2A1/2, that the caddy is not required to start searching for a player's ball before the player. A player may instruct his or her caddy not to begin searching for his or her ball. For example, a player hits a long drive into heavy rough, another player hits a short drive into heavy rough. The player's caddy starts walking ahead to the location where the player's ball might be to start searching. Everyone else, including the player, walks toward the location where the other player's ball might be to look for the player's ball. The player may direct his or her caddy to look for the other player's ball and delay search for his or her ball until everyone else can assist. So that makes a lot of sense, because if we've got a foursome, right, and each player has a caddy, that's 8 sets of eyes, theoretically, that can be looking for a ball at one time. So if my caddy were to go up there and start looking for my ball first, then there's only one set of eyes and the clock is started. So if we look for this ball first and then go to that ball, that's what we're seeing here, and that's totally fine. But what the player can't do is in this next interpretation, and this is back under lost too, it says the player may not delay the start of the search to gain an advantage. So the 3 minute search time for a ball starts when the player or his or her caddy or the player's partner or partner's caddy starts to search for it. So the player may not delay the start of the search in order to gain an advantage by allowing other people to search on his or her behalf. For example, if a player is walking towards his or her ball and spectators are already looking for the ball, the player cannot deliberately delay getting to the area to keep the 3-minute search time from starting. In such circumstances, the search time starts when the player would have been in position to search had he or she not deliberately delayed getting to the area. So that's just two oppositions to say, well, if you have good reason to help not start looking for your ball, to look for someone else's ball, that's fine. But if there's a big crowd or other people looking for it, the player can't stop and hang back and say, oh, I'm not searching it, I'm not letting the clock start. That's a loophole there. And we see here the clock would start theoretically maybe when the player would have gotten there. We see this kind of similarly in 13.3 when a ball is overhanging the hole and a player gets up to the hole, which we actually, if you watch some of the RBC Heritage over the weekend, there was that instance where that happened, where the player's ball did hang over, and so that just reminded me of that. But in any case, you can't deliberately delay search when the search is already going. In the first example, you're saying no, let's look here first and then go there, and it's a very well thought out progression of, okay, this ball is long, this ball is short. We're going to look for this ball first. That's courteous thing to do. Then we're going to go look for ours with the help of those people. So I think you can see how those two situations are different there. But anyways, back to the rule. If a ball is found in that time, so in that time, meaning in that 3 minutes, but it is uncertain it is the player's ball, the player must promptly attempt to identify the ball in C Rule 7.2 and is allowed a reasonable time to do so, even if that happens after the 3-minute search time has ended. And it says this includes a reasonable time to get to the ball if the player is not where the ball is found. Meaning if the clock is going and at 2:50, I find a ball and say, oh, I think this is it. It's a Callaway 4 with blue dots. That sounds like what the player described to me their ball was. And the player doesn't have to race here to get here in 10 seconds. This ball has been found. So the player needs to come over and identify it and says, okay, that's my ball. Okay, even if it was at 3:05 or 3:10, this ball was found by somebody prior to 3 minutes. And the rules say here, the player is allowed time to get to it. It's not like, oh, you didn't get to it in time because you didn't run across this field in less than 10 seconds to identify it properly. And so once you get to the ball, so that's all that said is, the way to think about it too is the clock starts is once the 3 minutes hits and no ball has been identified and there's nothing, then that's it. The ball's lost. It's a stray golf ball. It's a wrong ball at this point. So here it's just saying the player, it doesn't have to race there to physically get to it for the 3. If it's at 2:50 and then they run over at 3:05, oh, that's my ball. Thank you for finding it. We're good there. And this is where it says that. It says if the player does not identify his or her ball in that reasonable time, the ball is lost. So in that reasonable time is the time the player could get over to identify the ball. And it says if they don't get over that time, then the ball is lost. If I say, hey, I think there's a ball here, it might be yours, and they say, yeah, okay, whatever. And then 3 minutes expires and it turns out it was theirs, then here it's saying, well, they don't get the benefit of the doubt because they didn't try an attempt to come promptly identify it. Here, and just staying on the subject of lost here, again, lost is when a ball after the player and or caddy starts searching, you get 3 minutes. And there's an interpretation under lost that says the ball may not be declared lost. I do get this question quite a bit. You say, well, can't I just say that ball's lost and then it's lost and nobody can find it, or I'm not tied to it anymore or whatever? And the answer is no. You cannot declare a ball to be lost. The only way that a ball can be lost is if it's not found in the 3-minute search time, or like we'll see, a player plays a provisional ball closer to the hole or makes a stroke at a provisional ball closer than where the original ball is estimated to be. In that case, yeah, then the original ball is lost. So, but here we can't declare it, and this is what this interpretation says. So it says a player may not make a ball lost by declaration. A ball is lost only when it has not been found within 3 minutes after the player or his or her caddy or partner begins to search for it. So, for example, a player searches for his or her ball for 2 minutes, declares it lost, and walks back to play another ball, provisional ball, we're assuming. Before the player puts another ball in play, the original ball is found within the 3-minute search time that originally started. But since the player may not declare his or her ball lost, the original ball remains in play. So that's, again, the only way it can be lost. There's no admitting, there's no deeming it or declaring it to be lost. A lost ball is a very specific procedure in the rules saying the clock started, it went 3 minutes, it wasn't found. That's now a wrong ball, and it's now a lost ball. And then again, like we said with provisional, I guess you wouldn't even call it lost if you played a provisional. A stroke at a provisional ball closer to the hole, it would just be the ball not in play. So, which we'll see. And then to hinge off of that, we've got opponent or another player may search for a player's ball despite the player's request. So, and we just saw in lost/won that the player can't declare it lost. Well, here's a situation where we get asked about, again, a decent amount, to where even if the player prefers to continue play of the hole with the provisional ball without searching for the original ball, the opponent or another player in stroke play may search for the player's original ball so long as it does not unreasonably delay play. So if the player's original ball is found while it is still in play, the player must abandon the provisional ball. So, for example, at a par 3 hole, a player's tee shot goes into dense woods. So par 3 off to the right, it's in the woods. He or she plays a provisional ball that comes to rest right near the hole. So that's technically hitting 3 from the tee. Let's say they hit it a foot from the hole. Now they have a tap in for bogey. They're probably going to want to play that. Given this outcome, the player does not wish to find the original ball and walks directly towards the provisional ball to continue play with it. The player's opponent or other player in stroke play believes it would be beneficial to him or her if the original ball was found, so he or she begins to search for it. If he or she finds the original ball before the player makes another stroke with the provisional ball, the player, which is closer to the hole, obviously, the player must abandon the provisional ball and continue with the original ball. However, if the player makes a stroke with the provisional ball before the original ball is found, by definition, the provisional ball becomes the ball in play, because a stroke is made at it near the hole than the estimated spot of the original ball. And this is an 18.3C2, which we'll get to. However, what this is saying is you can't say, oh, that's lost, don't look for it. You can say that. That doesn't make the ball lost, because if that player goes to find it, and again, kind of unique example here, because if the player or caddy doesn't begin looking for it, there's no 3-minute timer. So that player could look for, as long as it's not unduly delaying play, which they probably would be, they could look for 5 minutes if it's not unduly delaying play, because that clock never started rather. So it's not good etiquette, certainly. I mean, if someone asked me to say in this situation, say, hey, I don't look for it, I can just not look for it, and that's fine. That would probably be poor etiquette for me to go do it. It wouldn't be against the rules, but it would kind of be poor etiquette, in my opinion. So this is why, too, as rules officials, if you're officiating, if you see a player in this situation and they, again, hit a ball to a foot on the par 3, they're probably going to want to just tap in on that for that bogey. So if a rules official finds that provisional ball in the same way another player in stroke play or an opponent found the ball, that ball is found, that player is required to come over and at least potentially identify it. And then now they might be in the tall grass or the junk, and now they have to play off that ball. That ball might be, it is out of play now. It's a wrong ball because this ball is found and it's no longer a provisional ball. So as officials, if we see a player in this situation, they're just walking right at the hole rather, we let it go. If they come over and start looking, then we want to start helping. But in this situation, you don't want to find every lost ball, which is kind of weird to say. But in this case, it might be to the player's detriment to find that ball. So we want to wait. Same would apply in the fairway. If they hit one off the map on the tee, and the next one's 300 yards center cut, and they don't even start looking at that ball and they keep walking, let's let them do that. If they, and I'll ask a player, do you want to find that ball? And they know this rule, and they'll say, nope, don't want to find it. Great, I'm not going to look. We keep moving on, no problem. So again, this rule can apply very easily to officials or spectators or anybody, or volunteers even. It happened in a PGA Tour event during a playoff with Phil Mickelson once, where a spectator, same situation, found Phil's ball, but Phil had hit a really good stroke after that, and now he's obligated to play it. So anyways, just a good side note for officials too here. Back to the rule, it says when a ball is lost or when a ball is out of bounds. Now we're determining there's inbounds and there's out of bounds, there's on course, off course. When is it in or out? It's a fine line, as we'll see. A ball at rest is out of bounds only when all of it is outside the boundary edge of the course. And it says a ball is inbounds when any part of the ball, and here we see any part of the ball. So if one dimple is applied here, then the ball's in play. So if one dimple is touching the course, that ball's in play. So we'll see if any part of the ball lies on or touches the ground or anything else, such as a natural or any natural artificial object inside the boundary edge, or is above the boundary edge or any other part of the course, a player that ball is in play. It's in bounds rather. And it says also a player may stand out of bounds to play a ball on the course. So we would see that maybe if there's out of bounds on a golf course and there's a lot of backyards and there's no actual fencing structures, it's just staked. If your ball is in bounds, then you're able to stand out of bounds to play that ball. And here, and we don't get into it as much, and we might should have, but it says the word boundary edge, which infers boundary object, which is a definition, and that's essentially any object that defines or shows where the boundary is. So that's why white stakes, when we look way back at Rule 8, you can't move a boundary object because you're moving the parameters of the golf course. So if you do that and you play your ball, you're going to get 2 penalty strokes, but we know we can fix that. So again, we don't get into boundary object as much here. Probably should have, but here's some pictures from the rule book that show what this situation is talking about. So again, the rules do a really good job of explaining it to you, very in depth here, and then saying, oh, here's a picture of what we mean. So this is in the rule book, and we're going to split it up into 2 halves here. So on the left half, we've got stakes or boundary objects, right? Defining this is out of bounds, this is someone's yard, this is the golf course. So it says when any part of the ball touches, right, anything on the course. So on the first 2 on the left, that first one's clearly out of bounds. The second one is clearly out of bounds because the boundary is defined by the course side edge of the boundary object here. So even though, let's say the white stake is 1 inch thick, if it's on the back end of that on the golf course, none of it's touching the golf course. We see on this third one there, half the ball is on this side of the boundary object and half is out. Again, if one dimple is touching the course, that ball is all the way in. And then obviously the 4th ball on the far right, that's well in play. And then let's look even closer at a line on the ground. So the line on the ground, that defines the edge of the boundary. So it's the side that touches the course side. So if it's white paint, it's where white and the green of the golf course side touch. So in a way, it doesn't matter if the line is this thick or this thick. The thickness of the line has really nothing to do with the boundary edge. It's where that white touches, the white paint touches the green grass, whatever, of the golf course side. So here, zooming in, the second one, or the first one rather, that one's obviously out. The second one, that is on the line, but as you can see, there's a gap between the ball and the paint. So none of it's touching the green grass, meaning none of it is touching the golf course. That means none of the ball is going to be defined as being inbounds. That ball is out of bounds. And then in the same way, we see on the third option there, half the ball or part of the ball is touching the golf course. Therefore, that ball is in play and it's on the course. And then obviously that 4th ball is well in play. In any of these cases, in options 3 and 4, you can certainly stand out of bounds to play one of those balls, even though it's touching the out of bounds. So again, the way to think of it is part of the ball touches the out of bounds, or touches inbounds, that ball's in play. So this is why, as officials, sometimes most times we'll carry string or like kite string, right? So if there are 2 white stakes, let's say they're 30 yards apart, if you can make this line, if it's really, really close, if it's a foot either way, you can usually make that determination. But if it's really close on the line, you would take the string and wrap it around the base of each out of bounds, and then it would form this line for you. And if any part of the ball is bisected by that string, then therefore it's automatically in play. It's on inbounds because it's on part of the course. So again, that's my bad for not including the definition of boundary object. I guess I didn't think about it as much because it's not italicized anywhere here, so I didn't catch it. So it's my bad. But boundary object, that is, the white stakes in the last picture there. So now that we know, in 8.18.2a, when the ball is out of bounds or lost, like we saw, now what do we do when the ball is lost or out of bounds? So it says if a ball is lost or out of bounds, the player must take stroke and distance relief by adding 1 penalty stroke, which we already saw that early on, what the definition of stroke and distance was, and playing the original ball or another ball from where the previous stroke was made under 14.6. And here, this is really a huge part of this whole procedure. The player must take stroke and distance. So if a ball is lost or out of bounds, and let's say it was a tee shot, right, and it hit, it's not out of bounds, but it's lost. It's in the fall. There's a lot of leaves. Player hits it in the leaves and can't find it in 3 minutes. That ball is lost, and the player must take stroke and distance. So the player's next stroke must be made from the teeing area. If it is not made from the teeing area, they have now additionally played from a wrong place. I say this to say, on a lot of some of the rules tests or rules quizzes, if you take those, this stroke and distance procedure gets very tricky because of where you think you have to play the ball next from. So this is saying if the ball is lost, automatically your next stroke must be from where your last stroke was made, anywhere under the confines here of what we see in 14.6, which we saw earlier. So again, if it's from the teeing area, your next stroke must be from the teeing area, must be. If it was from the general area, penalty area, bunker, must be from that spot plus a club length from where that stroke was last made, and then putting green placed on the putting green. So the ball is lost, you must play from that last where that last stroke was made. And then the exception here, so the player may substitute another ball under another rule when it is known or virtually certain what happened to the ball. So instead of taking stroke and distance relief, the player may substitute another ball as allowed under a rule that applies when his or her ball has not been found and it is known or virtually certain that the ball, and the key here is that the ball, and I didn't highlight it, I should have, but the ball has not been found. If the ball has been found, this exception doesn't necessarily apply. The ball has not been found and it is known or virtually certain, which we know is 95% certain that the ball came to rest on the course and was moved and not found by an outside influence, or played as a wrong ball by another player, or came to rest in or on a movable obstruction, and again, has not been found, or an abnormal course condition, temporary water, ground under repair, animal hole, or movable obstruction, and has not been found, right? You have to keep that in there. Or is in a penalty area, or was deliberately deflected or stopped by any person, and that any person, theoretically could mean a spectator, right? Or anybody. It doesn't say any player, opponent, or partner, or caddy. It says any person, inferring any person other than you yourself, the player. And it says penalty for playing a ball in a wrong place under breach of anything in this rule 18.2 is the general penalty under 14.7a, which is a wrong place penalty. So kind of like I inferred earlier, if once the ball is lost, you must play under stroke and distance. You must go back to where, and again, unless this exception applies, where there are 6 things here that could occur where you don't have to go under stroke and distance. And a lot of these, actually, I think all of these we've looked at except for the wrong ball. If the ball was moved by an outside influence, we've covered that in 9.6. We've covered movable obstruction in 15.2, or abnormal course condition in 16. Penalty area, that was last week, or deliberately deflected or stopped, that was rule 11. So we've covered all those. And in those, all of those instances, we know if there is knowledge or virtual certainty, we can put a ball in play under any of those rules, right? Depending on the penalty structure and whatever it tells us to do. Sometimes it's dropping, sometimes it's placing if it's on a putting green or whatever. So again, those are the 6 exceptions to this very strict policy here for stroke and distance. You must play under stroke and distance unless one of these 6 things applies. So any questions on 18.2 or anything we covered before we get into 18.3 and provisional balls?
But if you had a question there from the chat, feel free to unmute. I'm not sure if that was a comment or a question, but want to make sure we get it answered if it was.
All right, well, we can circle back to that if we have to. All right, so now we're under 18.3. This is the provisional ball. Do get a lot of questions about this just via email and phone calls, so pretty important here. Happens a decent amount. So 18.3a says, when is a provisional ball allowed? And it says if a ball might be lost outside a penalty area or be out of bounds, to save time, the player may play a ball provisionally under penalty of stroke and distance. And it says may, you don't have to. And it also says if a ball, so there's two things here, if it's lost outside of the penalty area. So if it's lost in another area of the course, if it's lost general area, bunker, or putting green or teeing area, again, it's not going to be lost in the putting green or teeing area typically. So this is mostly talking about if the ball is lost in the general area or lost in a bunker, anywhere lost outside of the penalty area. So if it's lost in a penalty area, we know that we have rule 17 to say, no, this is the ball's lost in here. There's knowledge of virtual certainty. You're playing under a penalty area rule, whatever that may be, red or yellow. Or if it's out of bounds. So if you hit it 200 yards down the fairway and there's out of bounds stakes and it bounces around really close to those, you get up there and it could be, 6 inches on one side or the other out of bounds. From the tee, the player may play a ball provision and say, you know what, if that is out of bounds, I'm gonna have to come right back here. So to save time, play a ball provisionally. As officials and at tournaments, we all, and depending on the course too, sometimes there's a course, a lot of out of bounds. We will always encourage players to play a ball provisionally if there's any question that the ball might be out of bounds. Because if it's not, and let's say it's a walking event and they go 300 yards up and they can't find it and nobody's there to help them, they got to walk all the way back. That really messes up pace of play. So we really encourage that to be done. This is a time-saving procedure, so please use it if you think you might need it. And it says for a ball that might be lost, again, might, this applies when the original ball has not been found and identified and it is not yet lost, like we saw earlier, when a ball crosses from in play to loss. It's that 3-minute timer after the player and or their caddy begin searching for it. And when a ball might be lost in a penalty area, but also might be lost somewhere else on the course. This is an important one. This is one we really get the questions on. Is there's a penalty area up there and it's about 250 yards away, and my ball might be in there, but it may not be in. I know I'm not allowed to play a ball for a ball and a provisional ball for a ball that's in a penalty area. Well, again, it very much goes back and depends on at the time the player's knowledge of virtual certainty, of knowledge or virtual certainty. So if it's knowledge or virtual certainty that the ball is in the penalty area, it can't be anywhere else, then no, a provisional ball is not allowed to be played. And we'll look at that. But if it's questionable, then we're going to say, yes, you can and should play a provisional ball. So I've got a picture of that later. So I'll dive into that more. But let's look at an interpretation here in 18.3a/1 about when a player may play a provisional ball and what the rule says about it. So this is when a player is deciding whether he or she is allowed to play a provisional ball, only the information that is known by the player at that time is considered. So at that time, meaning I've teed off, hit it to an area, who knows where, and that's the at that time. Is well, where might the ball be? Penalty area, out of bounds, general area. That's the information we're working with. And it's examples where a provisional ball may be played include when the original ball might be in a penalty area, but it also might be lost outside a penalty area or be out of bounds. Because like we saw last week in Rule 17, if there isn't knowledge or virtual certainty that the ball is in the penalty area, you're not allowed to apply Rule 17. Therefore, your ball is lost. Therefore, you must, like we're seeing here, go back and play under stroke and distance. So if it might be lost outside of that penalty area, we're going to say, yeah, you need to play a provisional ball, because if it's not known or virtually certain, you're coming back anyway. So go ahead and play it provisionally so that if it is not known or virtually certain, you've got a provisional ball in play. Like we'll see, if it is known or virtually certain when we get up there, the provisional ball is now dead because there is knowledge of virtual certainty at this time that the ball is in the penalty area. Goes on to say a player believes the original ball came to rest in the general area and it might be lost. If it is later found in a penalty area within the 3-minute search time, the player must abandon the provisional ball. So this is a good example right here, right? This is a tee shot, let's say, down the fairway, it's downhill, gonna hit a really big shot down there, and there's trees right in front of that penalty area. So let's say I hit it, and the ball rattles around and hits this tree here and hits it pretty hard on the fly and rattles around. Now, again, thinking back to last week, would there be knowledge of virtual certainty that the ball is in the penalty area, that pond there? And the answer is absolutely not, unless, I see the ball careen and splash in, or let's say we have an official down there spotting and they say, yeah, I saw it play, but or go in the water there. But just in general, if you're just playing on your own and it rattles around there, there's no way there's knowledge of virtual certainty that that ball's in the penalty area. Therefore, we cannot use the penalty area rule. Therefore, the ball will be lost or out of bounds. Therefore, you may play a provisional ball in this situation because if you get down there, they said, oh, yeah, it hit some trees and rattled around, and it's probably in the pond here. An official would say, well, no, it's not. There's not 95% certainty that the ball is in the penalty area. Therefore, you're playing a lost ball now. So this is when it's okay to play a provisional ball when the ball is hitting near a penalty. I do get a lot of questions where people say, oh, well, anytime a ball is near a penalty area, then, oh, it's never allowed a provisional. Well, again, it depends very much on your knowledge at that time when the stroke was been made is where might the ball be? Might it be lost outside of the penalty area? Absolutely. Yes, it might be in this case. Here's another example we'll get to in a minute about when it's not. Back to the rule, and it says, but if the player is aware that the only possible place the original ball could be lost is in a penalty area, a provisional ball is not allowed, and a ball played from where the previous stroke was made becomes the player's ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance. So it's saying you can't hit a ball, oh, it's known or virtually certain to be a penalty. Well, I want to hit another one just in case because I want to get a good swing or I want to try it again. There's no free tries really in golf because if you take a provisional and it becomes the ball in play, then you're going to pay for that through stroke and distance. But here's a good picture anyways of that. So let's say I've made a stroke and I'm standing where the red circle is, and I just hit the equator of the ball and chip it, and it goes right across the green and goes right down into that penalty area. That's very obvious. I might be behind that hill, so even though I didn't physically see the ball go in to that penalty area because of the undulation on the green, and I was behind the hill there, we can be known or virtually certain that that ball is in the penalty area because where else would it be unless it got hung up? So if I go down there and look and I say, well, I can't find the ball, but just because I didn't see it go in, again, with the heat I hit on it and it's shaved down, it goes right into the penalty area. If it wasn't up, it was known to be in the penalty. So here, if I've done this, I can't say, oh, I'm going to play a ball provisionally because obviously the only place that it could be is in the penalty area here. So I'm not allowed to play a ball provisionally because there is knowledge of virtual certainty that the ball played is going to be in the penalty area if it's not found. I mean, if it might have hung up, it might have gone in the little sprinkler hole there, or the tall grass might have held it up or something, in which case, great, the ball's in play. But if I get up there and don't find the ball, then I have knowledge of virtual certainty and I'm going to drop a ball using the procedures for Rule 17 because for a red penalty area there. So again, this is just kind of a lean to say in the other picture, there is not knowledge of virtual certainty. It's in the penalty area. Here, if I played the ball from that stroke, from that position, there's knowledge of virtual certainty. It's in there if it's not found. So not allowed to play a provisional ball in this case because I would have knowledge of virtual certainty. It's in the penalty area because I could easily see what's going on 50 yards in front of me, right? This is back to the rule. If a provisional ball itself might be lost outside of the penalty or be out of bounds, so now we're in a lot of trouble. So I've hit a provisional ball because my original ball might be out of bounds, and then that ball might also be lost or out of bounds. Well, we keep the procession going. We keep the chain, the progression going, and I played another provisional ball. So if that ball is also lost or out of bounds, that would be my second one lost or out of bounds, and now it would have been technically hitting 5 from the tee in this case, maybe after putting that ball in play. So it says the player may play another provisional ball. And that provisional ball, so that third provisional ball in this case, then has the same relationship to the first provisional ball as the first one has to the original ball. So there's a progression there. It's original, first, second, third, fourth, hopefully not. But you keep playing a provisional ball as long as you need to, and it relates only to the ball played prior. So now let's look at some procedural stuff for 18.3 and announcing the play of a provisional ball. So there's a very specific procedure for announcing and making sure you play a provisional ball because it needs to be clear why you're making a stroke at another ball. Is it for stroke and distance? That's now you have no safety net. If you hit that ball out of bounds, that's truly out of bounds. If it's a provisional ball and you hit that out of bounds, but your first one is found in bounds, okay, thank goodness. Now we're playing 2 off of that ball that's in bounds because that second was declared a provisional ball. So that's why it's important to distinguish provisional ball or not provisional ball or ball in play. So in this case, before making the stroke, before the stroke is made, the player must announce that he or she is going to play a provisional ball. It says it is not enough for the player to only say that he or she is playing another ball or is playing again. The player must use the word provisional or otherwise clearly indicate that he or she is playing a ball provisionally rather, under 18.3. Says if the player does not announce this, even if he or she intended to play a provisional ball and plays a ball from where the previous stroke was made under 14.6, that ball is the player's ball and play under penalty of stroke and distance. So if you don't announce this is a provisional ball, you're just upset and you throw one down and hit it, or even right when you throw one down, you've put a ball in play under stroke and distance. That's your ball in play. You have to say the word provisional, and there's an interpretation that says, what does announcing it mean, right? What does declaring a provisional mean? And it says statements here that clearly indicate that a provisional ball is being played. Because when playing a provisional ball, it is best if the player uses the word provisional in his or her announcement. However, there are other statements that make it clear that the player's intent is to play a provisional are acceptable. So in the rule, it says the word provisional must be said, and then in interpretation, it kind of eases off the gas and says, well, there's some other things. You could be another example of that you clearly indicate playing a provisional ball. You could be a real smarty pants and say, I'm playing a ball under 18.3. Most people won't know what you mean when you say that, so I wouldn't recommend that, but that would hold water technically. You should just say provisional. Or I'm going to play another just in case. So the just in case is really, that's, a synonym, I guess, of provisional in the rules of golf. And examples of announcements that do not clearly indicate that a player is playing a provisional ball and mean that the player would be putting a ball into play under stroke and distance include, I'm going to reload. Don't know what that means. And I'm going to play another. Well, another what? Another ball in play or another provisional. So in any case, all this comes down to is there are little areas of gray that we see here, and the rules even clearly define those up. There is no gray if you or the player says provisional. And sometimes what I'll do if I'm starting, let's say on a tee or I'm out officiating or whatever, and a player hits one into a very lost ball-ish situation in tall grass or near out of bounds, they're upset because they've just done something bad. And they're probably going to be playing stroke and distance, and they'll go to their bag and they're fuming and they're not really saying anything, and they'll put a ball back down. What I'll do is in a as least intrusive manner as possible, I'll just say and get it on the record. I say, are you playing a provisional ball or is that a provisional ball? And if they say, yeah, then that's coverage here, right? We're going to say, okay, yeah, you've correctly declared a provisional ball. So if I don't hear a player say it, I will ask them to kind of get that on record. So there's no, issue later when he says, well, I meant to, but I didn't say anything. Well, the rules here are very clear. If you don't say anything, that's not a provisional ball. That's the ball in play. So if you do find that original ball, it's not in play. So you've played 3 off the tee in that. But if let's say the player didn't know and they wouldn't found the original ball and said, oh my gosh, it's in play by a foot. If they didn't say provisional on the tee when they played that second ball, that's now a wrong ball. So it feels like it's their original ball. And oh my gosh, this is great. I'm hitting 2 now. It's a wrong ball. So that can really twist a player up, and an easy way to get them disqualified by not saying the word provisional, because again, the rules say by default, that's now your ball in play. If you don't play provisional, that is now a wrong ball. Any other ball is now a wrong ball. So very important to say the word provisional. That's the easiest thing to do. And again, I'll ask players just to get them to say it. Say, what is this? Is this provisional? Yeah, it's provisional. Okay, great. So 18.3c, we see playing a provisional ball until it becomes a ball in play or it is abandoned. So here, this makes sense. I think this is the time-saving procedure under 18.3c. This is why we're playing a provisional ball, is to save time. If we didn't care about saving time, then we would never play a provisional ball. We would go up, identify our ball. If it's lost in 3 minutes, just walk right back, take our time. It's out of bounds by this much. Okay, walk back, take our time. This is a pace of play initiative. So this is why if a player doesn't do it, they could really gum up the golf course, because if they're playing correctly, under the rules of golf at a tournament or a championship, they're going to have to go all the way back. So 18.3c1 says under playing a provisional ball more than once, says the player may continue to play the provisional ball. And here this is all predicated on 18.3c that an original ball was played and is potentially lost outside of a penalty area, and a provisional ball has been correctly declared, announced, and then played, and now we're here, the player may continue to play a provisional ball without losing its status as a provisional ball, so long as it is played from a spot that is the same distance or farther from the hole where the original ball is estimated to be. The easiest way to look at that is, as long as you don't play the provisional ball closer and make a stroke at it closer to the hole where the original ball is estimated to be, then you're going to be fine. If you play it closer, then that's the ball in play, like we'll see. But if it's the same distance or farther, so really there's a dividing line. There's either farther, just as close as, or near. Near is that dividing line. If you make a stroke at it near the hole than where it's estimated to be, then it becomes the ball in play. Yeah, I'm trying to see if the wording is here. That's what I wanted to say. But we'll see a picture of it that shows that. So this is true even if the provisional ball is played several times, right? So your first ball, you hit 300 yards, but it's in the tall grass. You say, I'm going to play a provisional, and you cold top it off the tee 20 feet. Well, obviously, if this is a time-saving procedure like we talked about, it makes no sense to say, well, now I got to go, I can only make one swing at that ball. I got to go find the original. Then, oh, it's lost. And the whole point is you play it up to that point of where the original ball is estimated to be. And then maybe you look for the original ball, you find it, you don't find it. So this whole rule really calls into question the status of the ball, is which ball is in play and which ball is a provisional. And when you have two, you can't have two balls in play. You got one ball potentially in play, and then the provisional ball at a certain point will or will not take over as the ball in play. And there's usually resolution there to say, okay, the ball is lost, the original ball is lost, the provisional ball is in play. That directly takes that in play title. Or, oh, the original ball is found, the provisional ball is now not in play, and it's not a provisional ball, it's now a wrong ball. We see that later. Again, going back to the original point, is this is true even if the provisional ball is played several times. Again, you can play it up to the point where it's estimated to be. But it stops being a provisional ball when it becomes the ball in play under 2, which is in a minute, or is abandoned under 3, which is also in a minute, and therefore becomes a wrong ball. So I alluded to that a minute ago. We're going to dig into that here in 2. The provisional ball becomes the player's ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance in either of these two cases. So the provisional ball and the ball in play are different golf balls to start off with. The original ball in play, might be lost. The provisional ball, not in play, that's played. At this time, we have 2 different golf balls. Only one of them is in play at this time. But it says the provisional ball takes that title of in play in either of these 2 cases. So this is telling you where the provisional ball usurps the power of the ball in play, as it were, and takes over the ball in play and is the ball in play. So the provisional ball becomes the player's ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance when original ball is lost anywhere on course except in a penalty area, or it's out of bounds, it's off the golf course. So the original ball is no longer in play, even if it is then found on the course after the end of the 3-minute search time, and is now a wrong ball that must not be played. So the parentheses there is inferring you hit it not out of bounds, but in an area of tall grass, you look for 3 minutes, that timer goes off at 3, you haven't found it. That ball, even if it's on the course, doesn't matter. That's now lost. Therefore, it is a wrong ball. Even if you find it at 3 minutes and 1 second, great. Pick it up, put it in your pocket. That ball is dead. It's a wrong ball. Do not play it. Now, because of that, like we saw in number 2 there, by default, the provisional ball, that becomes your ball in play because the original ball is now lost and no longer in play. So that's not in play anymore. So the provisional ball, by default, no matter where it lies on the golf course, in this case, is in play. And then, if it was in a penalty area or any other situation, you proceed under the rules accordingly. But now it's the ball in play. And then the second option here is when the provisional ball is played from a spot near the hole than where the original ball is estimated to be. So notice here it says when the provisional is played from spot near the hole. So it's played from the spot. So a lot of people will ask, well, if the provisional ball is hit past, meaning soars over the estimated point, does it become the ball in play? And the answer is obviously not. No, because if I hit a ball 100 yards off the tee, I say, well, I'm going to hit a provisional, hit that 300 yards now. That's obviously not my ball in play. It all comes down to where the stroke was made. So where you contacted that ball, that's the delineating factor, not, oh, well, the provisional went over it. Therefore, no, of course it's going to go over it most of the time and go past it. But in this case, we're talking about where the stroke was made. So the original ball is no longer in play, even if it is then found on the course before the end of the 3-minute search time or is found near the hole than had been estimated. So here we're really looking at where was it estimated to be, because you could hit it and it rattles around in some trees and yeah, I think it's lost in this area. Well, it could have bounced this way or that way, but the only thing that we can really hang our hat on is where it's estimated, because that's where we're going to start our search party, right? We're going to start where we estimate it, because where else would we look for it? We're going to look for it where we estimated it for it to have been lost. Says again, though, the original ball is no longer in play, even if it is then found on the course before the end of the 3-minute search time. So the provisional ball is played near the hole, where the estimated spot is likely to be. The provisional ball now takes over as the ball in play, or it is found near the hole and is now a wrong ball that must not be played. So the original ball there is now a wrong ball. So if you play a stroke at a provisional ball near the hole, again, at or farther behind is allowed and encouraged because you're playing up to that spot. But if you hit a ball 250 that might be lost and then hit a provisional 200, that's in the fairway on your way up, you hit that provisional ball. That's fine, goes past, okay. But if the situation was reversed and you hit the original ball 200 yards and the provisional ball goes 225, if you went and played that provisional ball first, that is played near the hole than the original ball's estimated point. That provisional ball is now in play, but we've got that stroke and distance we have to tack on. So technically it'd be 1 in, 2 back, hitting 3, hit 4 from near the hole. You've just hit your 4th stroke there, and that's your ball in play. Original ball is dead, is a wrong ball, cannot be played, must not be played, it says. It says if the player plays a provisional ball in the same general location as the original ball and is unable to identify which ball is which, and this is a unique situation where, typically when you play a provisional ball, you'd say, well, that was a Titleist 2, this is a Titleist 3, there's something, or this has got a black dot, whatever. There's something to differentiate those 2 golf balls so you know, but in this case, it's saying, what if you don't know? You just hit 2 right out of the same sleeve, the same golf ball in the same general area, or same general location, rather. If only one of the balls is found on the course, that ball was treated as a provisional ball, which is now in play. And if both balls are found on the course, the player must choose one of the balls to be treated as the provisional ball, which is now in play. And the other ball is treated as lost and must not be played. So, interesting situation where you're allowed to choose which ball you want to play. But in any case, whichever one you choose, the other one is by default the original, and then by default technically has been lost, and you have to play it's treated as lost rather. So you have to play the other one, and you're playing your 4th shot technically. So if it's off the tee. So again, unique situation. Here's a picture kind of wrapping it all up of what we were talking about. So if a player from the tee hits their original ball, call it 250 into the stuff, and say, it might be lost, and they play a provisional ball to A, again, if it's played from farther or as close as what the original ball is estimated to be, that's fine. That ball at A is played to B. We're still good now. That original ball is still findable. However, if I don't want to look for it, I can just keep walking up to B and play that. My provisional ball, once I've made a stroke at it from B, becomes my ball in play under stroke and distance going back. But I could also go look for my original and try to find that. Again, that ball doesn't become in play until the original ball is either lost because I couldn't find it in the 3-minute search time, or I'm making it lost by default by walking up and making a stroke from where the provisional ball came to rest at point B. So this is a good picture of kind of illustrating all that. And these exception. So it's similar to what we saw in the last exception. Not the same, but a little similar. So it says the player may substitute another ball under another rule when it is known or virtually certain what happened to the ball. So the player has an extra relief option when his or her ball has not been found and it is 95% certain that the ball came to rest on the course and was moved by an outside influence under 9.6, which we've covered, came to rest on the course in or on a movable obstruction or abnormal course condition, or was deliberately deflected or stopped by any person under 11.2c. And this doesn't apply actually either if the ball is found or not found. It's only when it's known or virtually certain what happened to the ball. If we know that another person deliberately deflected or stopped it, we can put a ball in play under that rule instead of using the provisional ball in this case. So when one of those is applied, the player may either substitute another ball allowed under that rule. So whatever 9.6, 15.2b, 16.1e, or 11.2c says, or treat the provisional ball as the ball in play under penalty of stroke and distance. So even if it's known or virtually certain that another person deflected or stopped the ball, and I had played a provisional ball, I can say, you know what, I'm just going to keep with the provisional ball. That's fine. This rule allows us here. And then the last thing under here is 18.33 is when the provisional ball must be abandoned. Because when a provisional ball has not yet become the ball in play under the things we just talked about, right, it must be abandoned in either of these two cases. Again, we're talking about it has not yet become the ball in play yet, meaning there's still the original ball, which is the ball in play, and the provisional ball is still a provisional ball, right? So we've still not made that in play by virtue of the original ball being lost or by having made a stroke at the provisional ball closer to the hole than where the original ball is estimated to have been lying. In either of these two cases, when the original ball is found on course and outside a penalty area before the end of the 3-minute search time, the player must play the original ball as it lies. And here, kind of connecting these, it's giving some commands here. It says the ball must be abandoned, the provisional ball must be abandoned, and the player must play the original ball as it lies, or it's found in a really poor lie. Okay, you don't have to play it as it lies necessarily. You can take it unplayable, but you're now hooked onto that ball. The provisional ball is dead. So that's like we were saying earlier in that interpretation, where if I hit one off the map on a par 3 and it's in just the junk in the general area, then I hit one to a foot, I don't want to find that ball. I want to go and tap in and take my bogey. However, if somebody finds this, if the ball is found before the end of the 3-minute search time, or if the 3-minute search time doesn't exist because I didn't start that and initiate that as a searcher, or my caddy didn't, then if that ball is found, that ball must be played, and the provisional ball must be abandoned, meaning if I don't abandon the provisional ball and play that is a wrong ball, which the end of the rule talks about here. Says, or under the second option, when the original ball is found in a penalty area, or it is known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area. So, it could be found or 95% or more. If you found the ball in the penalty area, that's 100% it's in the penalty area. So it says then the player must either play the original ball as it lies if they can, or take penalty relief under Rule 17.1d. Again, this whole thing is taking out penalty areas. It says, when we talked about the ability to even play one, it kind of syncs up here, right? Because it says you can play one if the ball might be lost outside of the penalty area. And even if you do, the provisional then must be abandoned when it is known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area. And again, you play the ball as it lies or take relief under any of the options of Rule 17, depending on yellow or red or drop zones or anything like that, or where the ball crossed. Again, it's giving you commands here. The provisional must be abandoned, and the player must either play the ball as it lies or must take penalty relief under 17.1d. So in either case, this is what I said earlier, the player must not make any more strokes at the provisional ball, which is now a wrong ball, meaning, it had this special temporary status as a provisional ball, not the ball in play. Now that we have either a ball in play, a ball found, or a ball known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area, that provisional ball loses its status as a provisional ball and never had the status of a ball in play. So it's just a stray golf ball at this point. So a lot of times what I'll do is if a player has done this and hit one off the map and hit a provisional and hit it in the fairway, once they find that original ball, so they want to go find it. Okay, they found it. I'll pick the ball up, that provisional ball, because once they found that original ball, that provisional ball is completely dead. And if they do play it, that's a wrong ball. So I'll definitely check and say, are you sure that's your golf ball that you found? They say, yeah, it's the TaylorMade 5 with the red dots, whatever. Okay, I'm going to grab this and I'll go give it to him, because this provisional ball is now dangerous because it serves as kind of a wrong ball that, a player might say, oh, well, I've got a ball over there and play. I'm just going to go play that one. I'll do that. So can't do that. So that's now a wrong ball once the provisional ball no longer has any status as a provisional ball. And it goes on to say all strokes with that provisional ball before it was abandoned, including strokes made and any penalty strokes solely from playing that ball, do not count. So now, again, the progression, right? We're back on the original ball's progression. Anything that happened with the provisional ball, that's gone. The original ball, that's where we're at. Or if it's in the penalty area, we're dropping off of that. So any questions on 18.3 Anything with provisional balls or anything we talked about just in any time with that? Nope.
Robert, we have one in the chat here.
Okay.
Says, regarding your chip into the water into a red penalty area, can you review the options for the next stroke if you were chipping from behind the green?
Does that infer like you're taking stroke and distance, maybe? Is that how you read it?
Yeah, Scott, if you want to
Yeah.
unmute and give us a little more info, that might be helpful.
Yeah, you had mentioned that playing a provisional obviously is not appropriate because you do have virtual certainty. It's in the red penalty area.
Mhm.
I was just curious about taking the actual, hey, you're in the red penalty area. How does the 2 club links apply? Or does it even, my no closer to the hole could be, certainly won't be towards you, because the pin will
Okay.
be in between you. That's kind of what I was getting at with that,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of depends on the angle and the kind of the feng shui of where the ball entered the penalty. So, approaching it from just step one, it's like, okay, where did the ball cross? Right here. It's a red penalty area. Okay, your options are stroke and distance, so you can go rechip it. You can take back on a line relief, which probably isn't a good idea given that it's a pond and you'd have to hit over it again. And then the third option is obviously 2 club links. So typically, we're going to be able to find a really small sliver of general area in that case, where if I'm squared up to the flag or the hole and the ball went in right here, I can usually find something that says, well, based on the outline of the line on the ground, and it might be this big, but usually you can find a little sliver to drop it in. So it's a good technical officiating question or dropping question because it gets into, well, what's no closer to the hole within 2 club links? And remember, this is not a nearest point of complete relief. We can just keep going until we find a sliver. It's very much tied down to that spot on the golf course and 2 club links no closer to the hole. If that doesn't exist, let's say if I get there and I'm like, well, there's nothing in the general area that's not closer to the hole. Essentially, in that case, that penalty relief option just doesn't apply. It's not a thing. You'll have to either take stroke and distance or take back on a line relief. In this case, the player would probably be better suited to take stroke and distance. Of course, we can't really say that if we're officiating. We'd say, well, here are your options. And this is actually not an option anymore because there is no place in the general area that's not closer to the hole. So hopefully that helps and makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so the last thing we're going to cover is kind of like I said, is this model local rule to stroke and distance. Again, this is like I said, this is a model local rule. So I always kind of liken it to a drop zone, right? If you're playing in a tournament and you hit a ball into water, you can't say, oh, there's a drop zone. I'm just going to use this. This is something the committee puts in play. The committee says on this hole or during this tournament, the model local rule for stroke and distance is in play. We see this in a lot of league play, maybe at clubs. Men's, women's, both, doesn't matter. Casual play. If you're, I'll do this if I'm playing, just casually, and I hit when I think I'm going to find, and I can't find it. I'll say, I just use the lost ball stroke and distance procedure for the equidistant arc here. That's fine. But the issue would be is if it's not in play and you're playing in a tournament and you do this, and we actually had this happen in not us, but I had a phone call about this happening at a big tournament. It's essentially going to be a disqualification because if you drop a ball 300 yards up of where you're actually supposed to play on the teeing area, if you teed it off out of bounds, that's going to be a serious breach, wrong place. So you're going to get disqualified. So if you're playing in a tournament or a league, you need to check with whomever's in charge and say, is this in play? Because if it's not in play and you use it, 99 times out of 100, it's going to be a DQ. So anyways, if it is in play, or again, you're just playing casual with some friends or by yourself and you hit it, no, I'll find it and you don't, this is a good time saver. And again, it kind of, the USGA and RNA, look at the stuff we have here. This is official. They've written this down and made this an actual thing because, people did this. This is what people did. And they didn't do it this way. They hit it out of bounds and what? Oh, it's out of bounds. I'll drop it next to the fence and I'll take one, right? That's a mishmash of penalty area and out of bounds that people just did. So the USGA conceded, well, we know casual players do this, so let's make an actual local rule that fits this, that's legit and fair and makes more sense than just dropping it and treating out of bounds like a penalty area, right? We're kind of mixing it there. So again, this infograph here, which is hard to read, but I'll get into it. Again, at the bottom it says RNA USA. This has been written and promoted by them. They're totally fine using this. Again, though, you're never going to see this at any high level competition. It's just not a thing. Casual play, totally fine. So let's look at it. It's E5, the alternative to stroke and distance for a lost ball or out of bounds. And I wanted to start with the preface that at the back of this model local, it's a very, very big local rule. So if you write it down, it takes a whole sheet of paper to really write it down. So what I'll do is I'll say, if someone asks, hey, the model local rule for E5 is in play. And if you need to look it up, look it up. But at the bottom, it says, but the player may not use this option to take relief for the original ball when that ball is known or virtually certain to have come to rest in a penalty area, or the player has played on the ball provisionally, just talked about, under penalty of stroke and distance. So in either of those two cases, if your ball is in a penalty area or known or virtually certain to be a penalty, this is not applicable. If you played a provisional ball, this is not applicable to the original ball. You could apply it to the second ball, the provisional ball, maybe. But this is not in play. This is not applicable. So it's only applicable if your ball is out of bounds or lost outside of a penalty area and you haven't put a ball in play provisionally. This is also why that we recommend a lot of courses. They have like tall grass on the sides of the fairways, and they're like, oh, those are penalty areas. We'll just call them those. That is why I definitely do not recommend blanket statement calling tall grass penalty areas, because if you do, then this local rule is not in play anymore. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you're treating those tall grass like penalties, which seems like the low hanging fruit, if you hit it into that tall grass area, well, if it's a penalty area, then where'd the ball cross? Well, I hit it 300 yards, but it crossed 50 yards off the tee. So I got to go look for it in the penalty area. I don't find it. If I'm playing correctly, I don't drop where the ball is. I got to go, where did it cross? Go back 250 yards where it crossed into the penalty area, drop from there, hitting three. That is not time sensitive in the slightest, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So that's why we recommend courses that say, oh, these areas are all penalty areas, and you also want to use this local rule. Not a good idea, because you're mixing and not matching. That's not a good idea. So we recommend just, mark your penalty areas or have them be actual penalty areas. That way you can use this local rule. So here's an example. This, and before we do it, remember, a ball lost and out of bounds, those similar here, are treated a little different. So let's look at that. So player, she hits her ball from the teeing area. It comes to here at point A. And again, it doesn't come there to point A. That's where it's estimated to have been lost, right? So in this case, we're saying you estimate where the ball might have been lost at. So say, well, I hit it 250 yards, had a good swing on it. There's a big area of bushes here. I think it's lost in there. That's going to be your reference point now for using this. So you'd come up to the fairway. So if that area that it was lost was theoretically 137 yards from the flag, you would come to the fairway at 137 yards, get 2 club lengths out into the fairway. That is now a relief area. Anywhere behind that, and where the lost ball was, plus 2 club lengths, like we see here, that pink area is your entire relief area. So you can drop a ball anywhere in there, and it's a 2-stroke penalty. So in this case, she's 1 stroke in, 2, 3 drop. She's hitting her 4th stroke now, which makes sense, right? Because when we used to mix and match, oh, well, just drop it here. We're not out of bounds for a stroke and hitting 3. That doesn't make sense. Here we're saying, 1 in, 2 back, hitting 3. By some miracle, now we find the fairway. Now we're hitting 4. So the balance actually works out for your penalty structure. The only thing they're doing is a big assumption. Again, you hit one off the map, lost or out of bounds. The next one's actually in the fairway. So while you have this big fairway, 99 times out of 100, you're just going to go to the fairway, how far over it was from the hole, 2 club lengths and drop in the air and hitting 4. That's mostly where you're going to go. And that's what the rule is designed to do, is get you to the fairway, plus 2 club lengths, drop, move on. So that's lost ball. So switching the ball out of bounds. So here we have a player, and he's hit it out of bounds here at point A. So in lost, like we saw, the theoretical thought is you can keep the distance you hit it. So if you really hit it 300 yards, you get to keep that distance. Where is it lost? Around in here, come there. Here, if this ball goes 250 but crosses at 225, right, or whatever, that's the point. It's where does it cross out of bounds? So if you get it out of bounds and it keeps going an extra 100 yards, doesn't matter. Where did it break the plane of golf course to not golf course? That's the reference point. From here, same thing. Swing to the fairway, 2 club lengths into the fairway, drop it there. And again, we see that little graphic there. It's a 2-stroke penalty. So here, if his tee shot came to rest in the fairway, hits it OB, he's 1, 2, and 3, 4 out, drop. He's hitting 5 now. So that's the procedure for lost, and this is out of bounds. Again, it's the nearest point of fairway. So this is an additional picture to say, okay, well, the ball, she airmails it over the green, out of bounds. This is where it crossed, call it 40 yards from the hole. Well, the nearest point of fairway might be way back over here, and she gets 2 club lengths in that, plus anything leading up to that reference point. So this is a really, really big relief here. She can drop it anywhere in there. Again, typically she might go to the fairway cut here, but she could drop it anywhere in there. And this is just to show it might be a very big area sometimes. If there's a par 3, and let's say there is no fairway cut, because the fairway cut is the line. You're coming to the nearest point of fairway, no closer to the hole. That's our reference line here, right? If there is no fairway, say it's a par 3, then this simply just doesn't exist. You don't get to make up your own fairway. If there's no fairway, then there's no reference point. If there's a reference point, there's no relief area, and then you can't drop a ball. So typically there's going to be, even if it's like that walk mow through at the par 3, that's could be technically fairway height or less. So again, it very much depends on the grass out there. So again, all that to say, we follow it up back to where we started. If it's known or virtually certain to be in a penalty area, that's rule 17. This does not apply. Or if you play a provisional, you're not allowed to play the provisional and say, well, if my original ball is lost or out of bounds, I'll just use that relief option. No, you've already rolled the dice and took a swing at another ball. And that might be to your benefit, because let's say you hit your original ball 50 yards off the tee in that direction, right? And you're saying, oh, I can do better than that. You play a provisional, because if you take this equidistant area, you're still dropping it 50 yards off the tee. That's not very good. So you could say, well, I'm going to hit provisional. Now you hit that one 250 up the fairway. That's a much better situation than taking 2 penalty strokes, dropping it, hitting 4 from where the ball is 50 yards off the tee, if that makes sense. So sometimes playing a provisional ball is good. This really is helpful if you think you're going to find it. You hit it up there, say, oh, I'll find it. Hits a tree, there's leaves around, and then you can't find it. Then you say, okay, you know what? I'm going to use this model local rule again, as long as the committee in charge hasn't prohibited or hasn't put it in play. Again, if it's just casual, then that's fine, and it doesn't mess up any handicap posting issues. You can still post your score when it comes to that, because this is a model local rule. So anyways, lastly, we're going to watch this little short video on it that really explains it, that the USGA put together, that does a really good job of showing you what it means here.
Starting in 2019, when your ball is lost or out of bounds, your course can use a local rule that does not require you to play under stroke and distance. Here is how it works. For 2 penalty strokes, estimate where you think your original ball is or where it went out of bounds. Imagine a straight line running from the hole through that estimated point. Next, estimate the point on the nearest edge of the fairway that is the same distance from the hole. Imagine a straight line running from the hole through that estimated point. The relief area where you can drop and play your ball for 2 penalty strokes will be quite large, anywhere as much as 2 club lengths outside of the 2 lines and between them, but not nearer the hole than the spot where you estimated your original ball is lost. You cannot use this local rule if your ball is lost in a penalty area or if you have played a provisional ball. To learn more.
So pretty good video there that explains all that. And that's all we've got today for the out of bounds and lost ball. So again, a lot of that stuff is on the USGA website. Some more videos like that, but again, I get a lot of questions about that one this time of year when leagues are starting back up and whatnot. So any questions or anything in general, just about anything in Rule 18 or anything outside of the rule we want to talk about?
Robert, Rick asked for explanation. You were talking about the model local rule with the lost ball. He said, why does this rule use the estimated place, not the margin where it last crossed? Seems like they're getting free distance.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, this is why it's not going to be used in any legitimate competition. It's an estimate. And, you say, well, the margin of where it crossed what, the bush it's in, or the leaves on the ground. Everyone thinks played enough golf at some point where they just lose a golf ball because they didn't have a good line on it or hit a tree. And what margin are we talking about, right? Tall grass, not tall grass, every hole is different shapes and sizes. So in this case, that's the benefit of it, is you do get to keep that distance. It's not ever preferable to use this local rule, because if you do, you're sacrificing 2 penalty strokes. So it's never advantageous, which is, they do a good job of saying, well, we're going to structure it like you did play a provisional ball or a stroking distance and then find the fairway. So it does, like the beginning of Rule 18 in the purpose statement, it says there's a progression. This very much cuts off the progression, which is why it's not a legitimate rule of golf. It never will be, because you skip a progression. Oh, I hit it over here, but it's lost. I'm just going to drop it here. This is just something that they put in for casual play to give a little bit of guideline to it. So that's, I think, having thought about it a lot, when they first came out, I think this is the only logical and correct way to do it, because again, there's so many other things out there that, oh, did it cross the rough or a bunker or whatever. Again, we're using our best guesstimate of where the ball is, and that's the best we can do. And it's not perfect, but it does get us around the course, and in a way that counts our score correctly and responsibly. So, any other questions? Anybody want to unmute and ask a question? All right. Well, again, appreciate everybody for coming out. We'll post this online and have this available. And then next week, again, as our last rule, we're going to cover Rule 19, or unplayable ball. That one will be pretty quick, actually. I think it's not a lot going on in there, and pretty simple. But we'll cover that next week. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is just rduke@coloradogolf.org. And yeah, we'll see you next Monday.